right, counsel, let's go back on the record. We're back on the record in 231-500-139. Mr. Bloodworth, anything before we continue with the state's case?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Lewis, Ms. Nestor?
No, nothing else right now.
Okay. The state's next witness, please.
Your Honor, the state calls Christopher Kouri Richins to stand.
We have Brady swear you in,
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the matter before the court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, subject to the fees and penalties of perjury?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Sir, could you please tell us your name?
Chris Kouri Richins.
Is that a common spelling of the last name?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kouri Richins, can you briefly tell us your background?
Yes, I'm a 23-year law enforcement veteran. The last 11 years of which was spent with the Salt Lake City Police Department Homicide Squad and the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office Homicide Team, where I was an investigator there.
And did you retire from law enforcement?
I did. At the end of 2022, I retired.
What have you been doing since then?
I started an investigations firm.
And what's the nature of the investigations that you do?
So we do investigations, training, and consulting work. So regular investigations for criminal and civil offenses, training for attorneys and investigators related to various subject matters. And then I also do some consulting work in criminal and civil cases as well.
Do you have any education, training, or experience with forensic digital evidence?
I do.
Can you briefly describe that for the court?
Yeah, so formal training. I have a 40-hour certification from the ZX Tracks. It's a 40-hour training course, call detail record analysis and location mapping. I also have a 40-hour formal training, also with ZX Tracks. As a subject matter expert. I'm a Cellbrite certified operator and a Cellbrite physical analyzer certified as well.
Judge, may I ask you, Mr. Kouri Richins, could put the mic closer to him?
Thank you. And since you've talked about that, what is Cellbrite?
So Cellbrite is it's device extraction, hardware and software. It extracts data from electronic devices.
I see. Have you been retained by the state in this case?
I have.
In what role?
As an investigative consultant and to analyze digital forensics data.
And have you analyzed and reviewed digital extractions of cell phones in this case?
Yes, I have.
I want to talk to you about a few phone numbers and just to identify phone numbers of different cell numbers or cell phones you have analyzed in this case. Do you recognize the phone number 435-671-1987?
I do.
Whose phone number is or was that?
That was the primary cell phone for the defendant.
Okay. You're getting kind of quiet again. Can you pull that
Sorry.
microphone?
It's and the phone. There you go.
Normally, that's not an issue.
There. Could you just repeat that answer?
Yeah, that's the primary phone number for the defendant.
When you say primary, does that mean that there were other phone numbers that the defendant used?
Yes.
And do you recall what those numbers were?
Yes, there's two other numbers that we're aware of. One ends in 1152, and the other ends in 9592.
And when you say that the 1987 was the primary phone, what leads you to believe that was her primary phone?
In this context, it's the phone that the defendant utilized for her normal, everyday business, communications with most friends, her business, that type of thing.
And the other numbers, let's talk about the 1152. What kind of device was that associated with?
That was associated with her 1987 device, but it was a number being utilized on that device. It was a Google Voice number.
Okay. So, can you just describe what a Google Voice number is and how it can be used on a cell phone?
Sure. It's basically a number that you create through Google Voice services, and you can use it just like a normal cell phone. You can make calls, receive text, that type of thing, and it's utilized through a Google Voice app.
I see. Now, the 9592 number, was there a device that was associated with?
Yes.
What was that?
It's referred to in evidence as a blue phone, but it is it's an iPhone that was obtained by the defendant after her original phone was seized by police in April of 2022.
I see. So was that phone activated roughly that same time?
Yes.
Now, speaking specifically to the device that 1987 number was associated with, did you observe a forensic extraction of that phone?
Yes,
And did you analyze that extraction?
I did.
Did you notice any information or data deleted from that phone between January and mid-March of 2022?
Yes.
And can you describe what type of or types of data had been deleted off that phone?
A lot of data, primarily and most relevant to the investigations in this case, the call logs, texts, web history, and web search.
So when you say that the texts have been deleted, does that mean the entire text threads between different parties?
Yes.
And was it everybody or in that time frame, or were there specific people?
Pretty much everybody.
Now you mentioned that web history had been deleted,
Yes.
and was there a specific date that prior to which that web history had been deleted?
Yeah, so there on that phone, the web history for that device, that primary device, was basically ended. It picked back up on March 10th of 2022, but prior to that, all of it was gone.
The deletions that you observed on that extraction, can you say how those deletions were made?
No. I would presume it was completed like most deletions are completed on a phone, which is manual deletion. But there's no indication in the software of, any other means of that, whether it was active or remote or anything like that.
Okay. The data's just not there.
It's just not there.
I want to talk to you about a person came up during this investigation by the name of Josh Grossman. Did you associate a phone number with a device belonging to him?
Yes.
Do you recall what that number was?
The last four is 1260.
And a witness by the name of Carmen Laubert, did you identify numbers belonging to devices that were associated with her?
Yes.
And was there a primary number that was associated with her device?
Yes, and I believe the last four of that was 6127.
Same question for a Robert Crozier. Do you recall a number for him?
Yeah, Indian 0540.
And finally, you're almost done with this test. Mr. Richins' phone number. Do you recall the phone number associated with his device?
Yeah, the last four of 9317 for Mr. Richins.
Thank you.
That passed.
Great, we'll get back to you. I want to talk to you about the defendant's communications with Carmen Laubert. Between the time period Well, let me ask this first. Were you able to determine by other means besides the defendant's phone whether there were communications between those two?
Yes.
And specifically for the time period of roughly January 1st, 2022 and March 15th, 2022?
Yes.
And where were you able to see evidence of those communications?
Through the call detail records.
Who's called detail records?
I primarily focused on the defendants, but also Ms. Lobbers as well.
And what does a call detail record tell you?
A call detail record is exactly what it sounds like. It's a detail of calls recorded through a carrier. It will tell us, tell an investigator or anybody looking at the record when a call or text was made or received, the duration of that call, and potentially location information related to that account as well, or that device as well.
And who stores that information?
The carrier.
So that's separate from the data that's extracted from the phone, correct?
Correct.
So if data were deleted off of a phone, would that still be available through the carrier?
The communication, the timestamps and the direction of the communications would, yes.
What about location data?
Yes, potentially.
You say potentially. What would cause it not to be available?
Time, quite frankly, is usually the inhibitor there. But most carriers retain call detail records for a year to 2 years with location history. It could also be that a carrier does not report location data for, say, for instance, text messaging. Some carriers do, some carriers don't.
I see. Specifically, the carrier for the defendant's phone, was location data available for the call detail records that you analyzed?
At the time the records were sought, no.
And do you know why that was?
Time.
Okay.
Yeah, where Verizon retains location information within call detail records for 1 year.
Thank you. I would like to turn your attention, if I can grab a binder of the exhibits that have been pre-admitted here, to Exhibit 33. Have you seen that Exhibit 33 before?
I have.
And what is that?
This is a Facebook Messenger record between Miss Lauder and an individual named Nicole Cummings.
Do you know who Nicole Cummings is relative to this investigation?
I do.
Who is that?
My understanding is a friend of Carmen Lauder, in which the friend is the one in which Carmen received a second phone number for Mr. Cruzier.
I see. Now, turning over to 34, State's Exhibit 34, do you recognize that document?
I do. 34? Yes.
Yes. And what is that?
This is it's like a phone extraction record.
And the bottom input in that record, is there any number there that is relevant to this investigation?
Yes.
What is that?
This is a message, or this is a contact in a device for a number identified as Mr. Crozier's number, the ending in 0540.
And is the name of that contact Robbie-Nick?
Yes.
And is that the same Nicole that we spoke of a moment ago?
Yes.
Now, I don't necessarily need you to go through those, but I'm referring now to State's Exhibit 35. In Ms. Lauber's call detailed records for her device, do you see communications between her and Crozier on February 10th of 2022?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately when those began?
It was in the evening. I don't recall the exact time on the 10th.
Do you see calls between them on February 11th as well?
Yes.
Also on February 11th, through Ms. Lauber's call details records and the defendants, did you observe any text messages between them on that day?
Yes.
Do you recall how many?
About 30, I believe.
And were there any text messages the next day, February 12th of 2022, between Ms. Lauber and the defendant?
Yes.
And you recall when those occurred?
I don't. I want to say midday, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. But those would be contained in State's Exhibit 35, that call detail record?
Yes.
And speaking of these, the call detail records, are these in Mountain Daylight Time or Mountain Standard Time?
These are UTC time.
Okay. And UTC is what time?
It's Greenwich Mean Time. It's basically zero. It's a method for everybody to basically stay on the same time zone, as odd as that sounds. Basically, you just add or subtract your time zone from UTC to get local time.
Okay. So if these are in February of 2022, what subtraction would have to be made to find the local time?
7 hours. So during daylight savings, when we fall back in November-ish, we go to -7, and then we spring forward in March usually, where we're -6.
Okay. Thank you. Moving ahead to the February 14th, 2022 call detail records. Did you observe any, sorry, moving away from that. Did you observe any text exchange between the defendant and Ms. Lauber on that day?
On February 14th?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You recall approximately how many?
I don't. Not off the top of my head. It's several.
Okay. More than a dozen?
Yes. I want to say 30 again. Seems right.
I want to turn your attention now to State's Exhibit 43. Well, and before we go on to there, I just want to clarify, when you see this call detail record, you're not seeing the content in any of those messages, correct?
Correct. Only that the message was completed, sent and received.
Okay. But when you do a forensic extraction of a device, if those the content of those texts are still on the phone, can you see the content at that time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On February 26th of 2022, do you see communications between Ms. Lauber and the defendant on that day?
Yes.
Do you recall when they started communicating?
It was in the evening. I want to, if I recall, around 5 p.m., 4 or 5 p.m. on the 26th.
And you recall when they stopped?
About 10:30 that night.
From those call detail records, specifically from Ms. Lauber's, were you able to see where she traveled that day?
Yes,
And was she at or near a Maverick and Draper that day?
she was.
And how are you able to tell that from the call detail record?
So within that call detail record, AT&T is Ms. Lauber's provider. AT&T does provide location data for SMS messaging. So we're able to determine what tower is being utilized when the Ms. Lauber's device made or received text messages as well as calls.
Okay.
So we put it into a mapping software and are able to determine which tower was servicing the device during any given point in time.
So it's the location of the tower that phone is connecting with, correct?
Yes.
And down in the Salt Lake Valley near Draper, are you able to see multiple towers I mean, fair to say there's more than one tower in the Salt Lake Valley?
Yes, typically speaking, the more dense the population and the urban area, the more dense the cell phone arrays are.
Does that make it more accurate to pinpoint where that phone is?
Typically, yes.
And is the contrary to that true? The less populated an area is, the less cell towers there are.
Typically, yes.
Speaking specifically about Midway, are there less cell towers in Midway, Utah, than there are in or near Draper, Utah?
Yes, significantly.
Now, when Ms. Lauber's phone appears on those towers near Draper Maverick, was she there on any other dates besides that 26th?
Yes.
What dates were those?
February 11th, 2022, and March 9th, 2022.
Did you observe her phone being tracked in that area on any other time in the records you
No.
were you able to track her movements from Summit County to Draper and back?
Yes.
And is that, again, just through tracking the towers that she's pinging off of?
Yes. The tower utilization. Yes.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about Midway. Does the precise location become more difficult when she's in a more rural area?
In this case, yes.
Okay. And why is that?
You have less towers serving a larger area, so with a larger estimated range or area in which the device could be in, the harder it is to pinpoint more precise location.
I want to turn your attention now to Exhibit 31. If you could flip that there. Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 31?
I do.
And what is that?
Is a depiction of messaging on a device from January 18th and January 20th of 2022.
And the top of that, the first page there says Kouri. Do you recall whose device these images are taken from?
I believe they're from Miss Lauber's.
Can you take one more look at those?
I will, yes.
Could those be from a phone belonging to a Hayden Jeffs?
I need to look at the contents.
Oh, sure,
of the
sure,
text,
sure.
just to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yes, I misspoke. These are devices from Mr. Jeff's phone. Or, I'm sorry, messages from Mr. Jeff's phone.
And they start on January 18th and they go to January 22nd
That's correct.
of
Yes.
2022.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to flip to States Exhibit 36. Do you recognize the record depicted there?
I do.
Is that for the number ending 1987, the device belonging to the defendant?
It is, yes.
Was there a call made at 8:53 a.m. on February 14th?
Yes.
And do you know who that call was made to?
I do.
Who's that?
Mirror Lake Diner.
And moving to State's Exhibit 38. Are these called detailed records for a number ending 9317?
Yes.
And did that belong to Eric Richins?
Yes.
Was there a phone call between Mr. Richins and the defendant at about 11:09 a.m. that morning?
Yes.
And is there a record of a photo being sent or some sort of multimedia message at 11:27 that morning?
Yes, and that was obtained via Mr. Richins' device.
Okay, so that's not here in the call detail record. That's it.
It's his physical device.
His
Yes.
physical. Okay. Were you able to see what that image was?
No.
Was that deleted from his phone?
It appeared to be yes.
And were you able to see that on the extraction of the defendant's phone?
No.
Why is that?
All of that was presumably deleted from the defendant's phone as well.
Did the activity on Mr. Richins' phone on the 14th of February 2022, did that cease between 11:39 a.m. and 1:32 p.m.?
Yes.
Was he active on that phone before and after that dead period?
Yes, he was.
And can you describe the volume of his activity?
Yeah, it would be what I would describe as normal phone traffic for that device. Calls and texts between friends, business-related things of that nature, yes.
Now, I'm not certain it's made it into the binder. Let me. I've handed you what's been marked as and admitted as State's Exhibit 7A. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that image of?
This is a screenshot obtained from a device of the defendant's phone, her navigation app within her device.
And is that from February 14th of 2022?
It is.
So this has not been deleted, correct?
From the defendant's phone, it was not in the defendant's phone. It was in Mr. Grossman's phone.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Did that originate from the defendant's phone?
Yes,
Was that sent to Mr. Grossman?
it was.
And was that sent at approximately 9:48 a.m. on February 14th?
Yes.
What? And can you just give a little more description about what that navigation shows?
Sure, it's a typical screenshot of a normal navigation application. There is a location on Rockcliffe Road. The device is it's depicted that the device is traveling northbound, and it gives an arrival time, an estimated time of arrival, and a mileage for that trip that it's depicting.
And on Mr. Grossman's phone, were you able to read any text messages surrounding this time frame?
Yes.
And did the defendant indicate why she was sending this to him?
Yes.
Why is that?
She said she was on her way to see him. He asked if it was about an hour, if she was about an hour away, and she said yes and sent him this screenshot to verify her ETA.
Speaking to the defendant's communications with Mr. Grossman, do you recall approximately when those began?
For the 1152 number, which is the first one I'm aware of, It began, I have a trail, basically a digital trail on that phone beginning in November of 2021.
And what was the volume of text calls, anything of that nature, up until March of 2022?
The volume varied depending on the day, but it was pretty much daily communication between the two during that time frame.
And are these phone calls and text messages?
Mostly text, but yes, some phone calls.
And have a number of those texts been recovered from Mr. Grossman's phone?
Yes.
And if I could just have you just thumb through exhibits 29 and 30. Are those excerpts from the extraction of Mr. Grossman's phone?
Yes.
And are they approximately December and January of 2021, 2022?
Yes.
And if I could have you thumb through 39 through 42. Are those also excerpts from the extraction of Mr. Grossman's phone?
Yes.
And are those roughly the time frame of February and March of 2022?
Yes.
And finally, the three exhibits, 44, 45, 46. You could look at those. Similar question, also excerpts from Mr. Grossman's phone?
Yes.
And are those specifically March 2nd and March 3rd of 2022?
Yes.
And finally, exhibits 50 and 51, if you could look at those.
Okay.
Also excerpts from that extraction?
Yes.
And a little bit later in time, March 20th and April 9th?
Correct. Yes.
So it's fair to say around the time that Mr. Richins passed away, there were ongoing messages between the defendant and Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
I'd like to ask you now about the extraction from the defendant's phone relative to the morning of March 4th, 2022. We discussed this at the detention hearing, correct?
Yes, we did.
And at that time, you were relatively new to this case.
I was, yes.
Have you had a chance to analyze further the data on the defendant's phone regarding that date?
Yes.
I'd asked you at that time about movement on the phone at approximately 3:08 a.m. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
Are you able to say at this time whether that was the phone itself moving or a connected device moving?
It appears to be a connected device.
And when you say a connected device, what does that mean?
In this case, I believe it to be a smartwatch. It's a device connected to the for instance, the defendant's cell phone that is tracking movement data.
When was the defendant's phone first unlocked that morning?
Right before 3:07 a.m.
And this movement activity, when did that take place?
3:08.
Do you recall how far the connected device moved?
I believe it was about 250 feet.
And was there a series of unlocks on that phone in the next 15 minutes?
Yes.
Was there additional movement around 3:21?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how much?
I believe it was around 140 feet, 143 feet, roughly.
Do you see a 911 call on that device?
Yes.
What time did that happen?
Just after 3:21 a.m.
Do you recall if that approximately 140 feet movement was made before or after the 911 call?
Exactly.
So in about that 15-minute time frame, the connected device moved about 370 feet.
Correct.
Your Honor, if I can just have one. Thank you, Mr. Koutridis. Those are all the questions I have for you this time.
Thanks.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Afternoon, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Good.
Good. All right. Let's talk about, go to State's Exhibit 45, please.
Okay.
Let me know when you're there.
Okay, I'm there.
Mr. Hill had you review Exhibits 44, 45, and 46. You recall that?
I do.
And he asked you whether that indicated there was communication between Ms. Richins as well as Mr. Grossman. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, so let's go to 44. And on 44, how is one of the senders or the parties identified as?
On 44,
Yes.
we have Mr. Grossman.
Perfect.
Yes.
And then let's go to 45. And how is one of the parties identified as?
My princess.
And then above that, where it says under party, first number 1, it says from, and then it has owner.
Yes, 9317 is Mr. Richins' number.
So that is not Mr. Grossman.
Correct.
Okay. So just to clarify, going back to Mr. Hill's questions, your testimony that what was included in Exhibit 45 was Mr. Grossman, that was incorrect.
Yes, I was mistaken.
Okay. You indicated that you were asked about the usage on the phone, about whether it was, you indicated it was normal tracking for that device. Do you recall that? And Mr. Richins' phone, just now.
About normal usage. Is that what you're referring? Yes, I do remember that. Yes.
Phone calls,
Yes.
text messages.
Yes.
Okay. Interestingly, you said normal tracking for that device. I suspect you mean for that person.
They can be one and the same. Yes.
The device doesn't do anything by itself.
Right. It has to be manipulated. or
Correct.
Activated. Yes.
So when you say normal tracking for that device,
Yes.
you mean normal usage by the person who that device belonged to.
Typically, yes.
Okay. You have no way of knowing really what the normal usage is, unless you review everything, correct?
To the number, no.
Perfect. You indicated that when responding to deletions on Miss Richins' phone, you indicated that it was from everybody.
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much, yes.
Was there a time frame for that?
Yes.
And what was that?
January through March. About March 10th or so.
And that was for which phone?
It was for the 1987 number.
Perfect. Testified about attending a Celebrite Certified Operator course.
Yes.
When was that?
2017.
Have you been recertified since then?
I have not.
A Celebrite Physical Analyzer course as well?
Yes.
And when was that?
The same time, 2017.
Then a 40-hour cell phone analysis and mapping course.
Yes.
That one was not through Celebrite, that was through Zetex and Trax? Is that what it was?
ZX is the company.
Correct.
Trax is the program. Yes.
Thank you. And so separate from Celebrite, but when was that?
The initial was, I believe, in 2013, and the subject matter expert class was in 2017.
And have you been recertified in that?
No.
The Trax technology gathered from the testimony, that's related to mapping?
Yes.
Okay. And is that what you used here?
Yes.
Now, you were retained by the Summit County Attorney's Office, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you hired by anybody else?
No.
And it was specifically to evaluate the digital evidence in this case,
Yes.
to analyze it,
Yes.
specifically phone extractions
Yes.
of Eric Richins,
Correct.
of Kouri Richins,
Yes.
of Carmen Lawler,
Yes.
others.
Yes.
Now, to be clear, you didn't perform the extractions.
Correct.
Who performed queries on any of her phones?
I believe the RCFL did those.
Who at RCFL?
I don't know that.
Who did the extraction on Eric's phone?
I don't know.
Who did the extraction on Carmen's phone?
I don't know.
What about the other phones?
I don't know. The examiner's name is in each report, but I don't know them offhand.
So you didn't perform the extractions. You weren't present when they were done.
Correct.
In fact, I think, if my timeline's correct, you were hired after the extractions were done.
Yes, for most of them,
So you don't have the benefit of having observed the extraction examiner do the extraction
yeah. Correct.
or validate the results of the extraction.
Through the examiner, no.
And you don't have the privilege of observing the extraction examiner perform manual decoding methods
Correct.
or manual decoding methods in the hexadecimal code.
Correct.
You didn't confirm whether the extraction examiner validated their extraction tools.
No.
Let's talk about the Celebrite extraction process.
Okay.
We're going to go from the device to the data.
Okay.
Okay? That, I'd like to be so visual. So, this is a target device.
Correct.
Let's
Okay.
assume this is a target device.
Okay.
Let's hope it's not a target device for my sake.
Right.
This is a target device. We're going to say that this right here is UFED. Okay? So that is the Universal Forensic Extraction Device, correct?
Yes.
That's what it stands for?
Yes, he further, yeah.
Your Honor, I'm going to make an objection to this point as to relevance. I don't know that this is necessary at this point in time to a probable cause standard.
I'm not sure where we're headed, so I'm going to give Mr. Ramos a little latitude here until I know where we're headed.
Thank you.
This is UFED. Okay. You're going to plug this into this, and then what it's going to do is it's going to spit out something.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
I mean, it's not the technical term, but. So once we have that, it's in a raw format.
Correct.
Now, you have been given, when you were brought on, the output, what it spit out,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay. So your testimony, both at the detention hearing and here, is based on this, on the
Yes.
spit out version.
Correct.
Okay. You have not received the raw data.
There is raw data available, but
Correct.
no.
Correct.
Yes.
There is raw data available. You have not received it.
Correct.
You have not analyzed it.
Correct.
You have not cross-referenced it with what you were given.
Correct.
Perfect. Now, let me pause. When you state that information was deleted, it doesn't tell you in what you've been given how that happened,
Correct.
why that happened,
Correct.
where it happened.
Also correct.
The raw data could potentially hold that.
Potentially.
Now, you use Celebrite, these extraction tools, you rely on them to provide you this information so that you could then assist, in this case, the Summit County Attorney's Office, with their case, correct?
Correct.
With meeting probable cause standards.
Correct.
In terms of location of individuals,
Yes.
such as Miss Lawler.
Yes.
Okay. Now, to be clear, I only have what you've been given as well. So I'm relying on the information that has been spit out, but not on the raw data, just so we're clear.
I want to talk to you about your validation process.
Okay.
Validation of data.
Okay.
As, or having been rather, certified, you know the importance of being able to validate the data that you review.
Yes.
One of those methods is possibly to use it with the, or compare it to the raw data. That's one way.
Yes.
Another way is perhaps to use the cell data location from call detail records
Yes.
in terms of location.
Yes.
Now, when you use the software, that was a form of validating, sorry, I apologize, what did you call it? The TRAX technology, that TRAX software.
Yes.
That's a way of validating whether the information that you received is accurate.
Correct.
You talked about the cell towers.
Yes.
Now, this program, we're going back to spitting, does it spit out something for you?
It does.
Okay. Now, have you provided that to the Summit County Attorney's Office?
Yes. You're talking about the mapping?
The mapping?
Yes.
Okay. And are those towers that you referenced earlier, are they sectorized or omnidirectional.
Their sector.
Okay. When you use that program, were you aware at that point that that software had been found to be unreliable in courts?
I'm not aware of that.
You've not been aware of it.
No.
But you haven't been certified since 2017.
I've been certified since 2017, but I have not. There's no need for a recert on that course. It's a learning, and then it's a continuing education.
What software version did you use on for the tracks software?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
When you did it, was it the most up to date?
Yes, as far as I knew.
Had you updated it since 2017?
Yes, it's web-based, so it's updated constantly. So you can rely on the fact that if you're updating, say today, that it would be the most up-to-date software package.
And what about Celebrite itself, your Celebrite certification process?
Yes,
There are no requirements
correct.
to recertify,
Correct.
but they do recommend that you recertify
They do.
every 2 years.
They do. Yep.
But you've not done that.
Correct.
Along those same lines, there is no state of Utah, say, standard for mobile forensic extractions.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
There's no national one.
No.
There's no international one.
No.
It's pretty much whatever Celebrite says.
Well, they're one company.
Correct.
So,
To my point.
yeah.
Did you review or were you given rather any mobile data sets from the individuals who performed the extractions on all these phones? Like sample data sets, controlled data sets?
No. No, it wasn't.
Are you familiar with external enrichment?
I'm not.
Are you had indicated rather, you were asked about the activity sensor of an Apple Watch.
Yes.
How did you determine between the detention hearing and now that it was in fact an Apple Watch?
A review of the download stated based on the Celebrite extraction that it was a connected device.
Now, are you qualified in mobility metrics?
No.
Do you know what mobility metrics are?
No.
You testified about the distance that was covered on the morning of March 4th by a connected device.
Yes.
And you were very specific on the number. Okay?
Yes, more or less.
But you don't know how that number was calculated.
I don't know the internal calculation process of the devices, no.
You just read it.
Yes.
You read what was spit out.
Correct.
You don't have the data, the raw data. Correct?
Correct.
So everything you've testified to is basically because you've read it.
Well, yes, and the extractions from the devices, but yes.
Correct. Just what was given to you.
Yes.
Were there items that were deleted from Mr. Richins' phone?
From Mr. Richins' phone?
From Eric's?
Not that I'm aware of.
But it could be.
Could be.
Have you ever worked with Mr. Todd Gabler?
With? No.
Alongside?
Alongside and, quite frankly, against.
On this case?
No. Well, with, yes, on this case.
With on
yes.
this case. And has he provided information to you?
He has?
Has any of that information been used in your testimony today?
No.
I believe that's it, Judge. If I could just have a quick second.
Take them all. Natural. Ms. Nestor, just push the button.
Thank you. Sorry.
Just a couple more, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Has the Richins family ever hired you?
No.
Have they ever paid you?
No.
Is the
I did sound quieter.
Did sound quieter.
Let us just check for a second, folks.
It sounded like my conscience was speaking.
In fact, mine might be. Brittany, you broke everything.
Way to go, Brittany.
Yeah, I'm on my computer. Why would we need something that's going overhead? I think, well, the things going overhead are muted, so
A lot of things go over my head.
there we go.
Oh,
Just saying.
Last question.
Yes.
Did you want me to repeat that?
Have they ever paid you?
Yeah.
Last question.
Perfect. What was provided to you by Todd Gabler?
Off the top of my head, mostly tolls.
Tolls?
Yeah. Yeah. Call tolls, toll records from the Verizon toll records.
No further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Hill, any redirect?
Just briefly.
Okay.
Mr. Ramos asked you about any deletions that you observed from Eric Richins' phone. And you had previously testified that a picture that he sent on the 14th was deleted. Is that
Oh,
right?
yes, that's correct, yeah.
How could you tell that that was deleted?
Well, it's not present any longer. It shows a file path that it used to exist, but the image itself is not there.
And so to follow that, when he asked you if there's anything else that's deleted, did you see anything similar to that picture or any remnants on that phone or relics that showed deletion the same way that photo did?
Not that I could recall.
Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Mr. Ramos, anything on that?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Can we let this gentleman step down? Mr.
Yes.
You can step down, sir. Thank you.
Your Honor, can I suggest, please, a brief recess? Mr. Burmister's going to set up the computer.
Okay,
There's about an hour.
no problem. Why don't we take a 5-minute recess? Who's testifying after the recess?
Your Honor, Ms. Carrington, Brooke Carrington.
Okay, she's present.
She is.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Court's in recess. Thank you.